Woman at the well. When Jesus was talking with this woman, they had a discussion about water and living water and not having a bucket to draw water out of the well and the various things. Finally, Jesus said, "Go get your husband." She said, "I don't have a husband." You're right. You've had 5 husbands. The man you're living with now is not your husband. Immediately, she changes the subject. Enough of this personal talk here. She changes the subject to an age-old question between the Samaritans and the Jews. In the Old Testament, we have the people of God were divided into 2 kingdoms. The Jews were in the south and Israel was in the north. When the Assyrians came, they conquered the Israelites and took them off the land, leaving just a few people there. Then they took some people from the area of Babylon and brought them in to live on the land. Immediately they intermarried with the people who were already there. So the Jews in the south already knew that this was a mixed marriage and it wasn't right. But they continued to serve the false gods that they had brought with them. Suddenly lions appeared and started killing people. And they didn't know what to do. But the Assyrian king said, I know what's wrong. They're not worshiping the God of the land. So he had his officials go to where the Israelites were and get one of their priests, send him back to the northern area, now called Samaria, and he taught the people about the 5 books of Moses. And so they took the 5 books of Moses and they combined it with the worship of their false gods and created a whole new religion. They held that when Moses said to go in the land, he gave very special instructions of what to do. So Joshua, following these instructions, went to Jericho, destroyed Jericho. And then to follow what Moses said, he went up the mountain to a city called Ai. After he finally destroyed Ai, then he went to, according to what Moses said to do, went to Mount Gerizim. Now there was Mount Gerizim and there was Mount Ebal. They camped between the two. According to what Moses said, Joshua divided the people into the tribes into 2 groups. Part of the went up in one mountain, and part went up into the other mountain. The people on Mount Ebal were to read the curses of the law. The people on Mount Gerizim were to read the blessings of the law. Then Joshua wrote the entire law on Mount Gerizim, wrote the entire law on a stone. Now, he probably didn't chisel it out. It was probably whitewashed and then written on. And then he built an altar there. The Samaritans say that was the place where Abraham brought his son Isaac when he went to sacrifice him. It wasn't down in the south at all. It was right here. And that this was where the temple was supposed to be built, not in the south, in Jerusalem. They felt that David and Solomon, they weren't in the 5 books of the law, and they weren't supposed to suddenly declare that Mount Moriah was where Abraham sacrificed his son. That Jerusalem was supposed to be the place to build the temple. It was supposed to be here. Well, obviously this was a conflict then between the Jews in the south and the Samaritans. But they were 2 different kingdoms. It was okay. But then Babylon came. When they came, they took Judah, destroyed it, destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. and took the people off the land. Samaritans said, here's our chance. The temple, this false temple down in Jerusalem, is now gone. So they built a new temple. Built it right there in Gerizim, right on top of the mountain. They said, this is where it ought to be. So 70 years later, when the Jewish people came back from Babylon and Persia, they went back to Jerusalem and they started rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah. And this started the conflict now. No, you shouldn't do that. We already have the temple right here. And it was all back and forth because the people in the north did not accept anything that was not in the laws of Moses. The people in the south said, well, yeah, but you're mixing all of this idolatry in, and this whole conflict started. Years later, during the intertestament time, between the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Jews took over the entire land. And when they did, they went to Mount Gerizim and they tore down and destroyed the temple that was there. Now that brings us down to this story. The woman is saying to Jesus, who's right? Should the temple and the worship of God be at this mountain here, Mount Gerizim? Or should it be in, like the Jews say, down in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah? Well, Jesus immediately sided with the Jews. He said, no, they're right. They know where it ought to be, that is where the temple was to be built, down in Jerusalem. But, he said, the day is coming, is now here, that God is looking for those who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. I trust that little bit of background will help you as you read this story. They were at Jacob's well. When I take people to Israel, one of the highlights of the trip is to take people to Jacob's well, the very place. It's one of the few spots in the entire land that you can say, wow, 100%, Jesus was right here. This is the spot. I trust someday you'll get to go there and experience being in the exact place where Jesus talked to the woman at the well. Come back next week when we continue on with more insights on the story of the week. We'll see you next week.